The Lord of the Rings, as well as other works by Tolkien, have been subject to much speculation concerning hidden meanings and representations of Tolkien's worldview that might be found in his writings. Avid readers and casual ones alike have a natural inclination to read into these elements of Tolkien's world. Some of the most popular of these are Eru Ilúvatar being a representation of God, Gandalf and the other wizards being angels, Sauron as being the devil, and so on and so forth. However, in this video I'm going to dispel these theories and incorrect readings of Tolkien by distinguishing what he referred to as the difference between allegory, allusion, and application. Let me begin by clearly defining these terms and highlighting their distinctions. Allegory is defined as something found within art, literature, a poem, etc., that can be interpreted in order to discover a hidden meaning. Allegory is synonymous with, say, a parable or an analogy. An allusion is simply deliberately placed similarities found in a poem or literature that can be traced to influences from other work or beliefs so as to call these things to mind. Think of allusion as an indirect reference to something, not to be mistaken for that something, but merely meant to call it to mind. Application, as Tolkien used it, might be easier understood as implementation or enacting something. Tolkien used application in the sense that he applied his beliefs in his work. Now that we have that out of the way, let's dive in. Speculation about hidden meaning in The Lord of the Rings is not a new phenomenon. It has, in fact, been going on since the first books came out. Tolkien busied himself answering letters from fans concerning interpretations of his work. Time and again, his answer was the same. There is no hidden meaning or allegory for this standing for this in The Lord of the Rings or any other Middle-earth mythos. Tolkien was aware of the inclination of his fans to want something more to be written in between the lines, but was unwilling to entertain such readings of his work. Those familiar with Tolkien and his life and beliefs can understand why readers might draw such conclusions as biblical references in The Lord of the Rings. These conclusions are also why fans of Tolkien are often fans of C.S. Lewis and are familiar with his Chronicles of Narnia. The two authors were not only contemporary but also close personal friends. The reason these two great authors' relationship is so important to this discussion is that where Tolkien's Lord of the Rings does not hold any allegory, Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia is dripping with it, so much so that you might even say his work surpasses allegory and is rather a direct reference to Christianity. Lewis practically beats his readers over the head with his allegory and even blatantly states within the narrative itself that the story is linked to greater things. This would be an example of extreme application. Therefore, readers of Tolkien, often readers of Lewis as well, attempt to make similar connections in The Lord of the Rings. However, it is clear that Tolkien wrote his Anglo mythology to be whole in and of itself rather than dependent on outside beliefs for greater meaning. He merely applied his beliefs to his work, that is to say that Tolkien was not necessarily unaware of the connotations his work held. In fact, his indirect use of allusion to call to mind his beliefs coincides with his other writings. At times, Tolkien kept his personal beliefs ambiguous, for example, his thoughts on salvation by works versus by faith, though I believe it is not difficult to discern which side his bread is buttered on, so to speak. I will use an example from The Lord of the Rings to frame this concept. As I was discussing this topic with a good friend of mine, Gandalf's sacrifice at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm was brought up. For some readers, Gandalf's sacrifice and subsequent resurrection is an allegory for Jesus Christ's death and resurrection. That is to say that Gandalf is in essence a Christ figure. This reading would be incorrect in Tolkien's eyes. Rather, Gandalf's actions allude to Christ, implying similar connotations but by no means meant to be the same. Another example from the same moment in the Fellowship of the Ring is when Gandalf calls upon the secret fire, which Tolkien bothered to capitalize. This secret fire is not a reference to God or the Holy Spirit of the Christian faith, but is quite simply a call upon the power of the Ainur within the realms of the narrative. This allusion is wholly constrained by its boundaries within its fiction, does not stretch out into our world to connect with any religious beliefs. However, it does serve to allude to Tolkien's own belief as he is influenced by them in his writing. Hopefully this serves to clear up some things for Tolkien fans, and though I doubt it, perhaps this distinction will be kept clear the next time a Tolkien fan writes a theory for what such and such symbolizes. For Tolkien, any symbolism in his work only symbolizes something else in his world, not something in ours. But this is part of the wonder of Tolkien and his work being so vast as to have internal references and mythos to draw from. even if much of his work is an application of his reality outside of his writing. That is to say, Tolkien's beliefs certainly influenced his writings, and I think for the better, but it was not the author's intent for his work to be taken allegorically, but rather as an application.